Now, a very important aspect about the cure of chronic diseases will be discussed now. That is, understanding the stage of curability or incurability, so that we may not do any harm to either. Yesterday, I discussed about the main causes of incurability of a disease. Now, how can we understand that a case is curable? That's more important than to understand a case which is incurable. Both are equally important, but to understand a curable case is more important and more useful, so that we may not class the curables also along with the incurables. The moment we decide a case incurable, we can cross the standards of homeopathic treatment and do some things by way of giving relief to the patient. Whereas we should never resort to such methods as long as there is a little possibility of cure. For example, I narrated the story of the aconite case in the morning. We should not venture to rush in such a way with curable cases, because the case goes into complications and we may be the cause of incurability. That's the one thing which we should not do. But the curability or otherwise never rests with us. It is enough if we do not commit any blunders or mistakes. If our duty is properly done, that is all what we can do. Many factors contribute to the cure of a disease, and not more than 20% exists with the doctor. So, any doctor should remember his or her own limitations. And all the secrets of cure of all systems existing till now put together have not crossed the line of 20% of the real secrets that are existing in nature. Still, there are 80% to be investigated. And the medical history of mankind till today, when it is properly understood, it is equipped only with about 20% of the secrets of curability, secrets of cure that exist in nature. So we can't boast of the advancement of science in leaps and bounds. No doubt science is advancing, but during the past 3 or 4 decades, it is only the technology of medicine that is improved, not the science of medicine. So we should distinguish between the two. Actual medical science has not made much improvement. It is only during the past 10 or 12 years that the real improvement of the medical science has once again started. And since the time of Hahnemann, the real science of curability and incurability are made to be understood properly. And at every step we should use the science and understand where we stand and what are our duties with each patient. And as long as a case is curable, the first thing we have to do is not to create any amelioration to the patient, which has nothing to do with the real cure. And a step taken to cure in its real sense always causes amelioration to the patient immediately, only when the disease is in this earlier stages. So, if you take stage 1, there will be as much cure as there is amelioration. Amelioration is directly proportional to the cure. Rather, cure starts with amelioration. In such cases, we can directly deal with the most indicated remedy selected on the basis of the mentals and modalities and some other distinguishing symptoms. The three groups of symptoms put together can be called the characteristic symptoms. Suppose we select a remedy for a patient who is suffering from headache on the basis of his mental behavior. He is generally not inclined very much to be active, tries to avoid exertion and much work as far as possible. If he tries to take the convenient way of getting things done, needs to get things done than to do. And if we select on that basis, for example, bryonia, and verify once again, if the patient feels heavy in his body and mind whenever he is sick, and put a mark of verification. Again verify if he is suddenly sick when he is active or busy, or begins to be sick some hours before, gradually becomes sick through a period of some hours, for example 4 or 5 hours, so that he may understand that he is going to get an attack of headache this evening. That is how he feels in the morning. Then put a second mark of verification that it is bryonia. Because with any amount of experience, we cannot understand the importance and significance of the sentence that complaints start slowly and develop slowly under the heading of bryonia in Materia Medica. The importance of that sentence will be understood after we have seen 100 or 150 typical cases. What the scientist means when he expresses that complaints start slowly and develop slowly. The bryonia fellow can suspect that he is going to get an attack and has enough time to report in the office and come home before he is really sick on the bed. And if there is any exception for this, never class him as a bryonia patient. And you can never have satisfactory results with bryonia. Sometimes the headache is cured with bryonia, as I found in my early years of practice. But again, it recurs. And during the period when the headache was better, the patient was definitely worse. And he was uncomfortable when there was no headache. And once again, when there was the next attack, and after the amelioration of the attack, the patient is once again better. In all such chronic diseases, the patient is generally better after an attack of the after an attack of the acute condition. You observe many cases of epilepsy also. When we are able to control the attack and create a bigger interval, we find the patient mentally worse. And the moment he has an attack and then a recovery, he is almost quite normal in his mental setup. These are the most important things which the masters of homeopathy have pointed out, which we find true with every typical chronic disease. So, whenever you find the chronic brain patient coming down slowly into an attack, then he has time enough to predict his own next attack. Then you put a mark that you have another symptom with which you have verified that it is brain. And observe him further. He wants to take a walk or take some rest. If he is generally inclined to take a walk, he belongs to one group of medicine. If he generally prefers to stay at home and have some sedentary way of activity, that is only reading and studying and research. If you prefer such an activity to a social activity, you class him under another group of drugs that include bryonia and also sulfur. Like this, you have about 500 drugs that come under the heading of Y, and about another 500 drugs that come under the heading X. And another way of grouping yesterday I suggested, that is those who like warm weather and warmth, and those who are dreaded of chill weather and cold exposure, under one group of drugs, and those who prefer cool breeze, those who are inclined to open the window again and again, and those who are uncomfortable in a closed room, under another group. Now, you can call this group A and group B. You should practice to remember the drugs under group X and group Y separately from the drugs under group A and group B. Then you have common drugs, which are only a few and not so many. But this way of classification is unerring, and it many times saves us from committing mistakes. As long as we follow the generals, that is the general symptoms, often we are not at fault in using the drug. And whenever we neglect these general symptoms, even though we go into the very minute details of the case, many times we are at fault in selecting the remedy. This is stressed many times by the authors of the Materia Medica, and also in the philosophy. But generally, unless we make it a habit to follow this method, we cannot many times make a correct prescription. We should be able to understand to which group the patient belongs. Then that group gives you the remedy more correctly than we try to pick upon a remedy directly. Many times remedies suggest to our mind when we are observing patients, and we should not be tempted to select them when they come to our mind. Because one of the faults of the human logic is that we select according to the available data. When we have about 10 points to 10 points available, we select only according to these 10 points. And again tomorrow, then there are 12 points available, we are inclined to select according to the 12 points. And then after 5 or 6 months intimacy with the patient, we have about 50 points of information about the patient. We are inclined to select on the basis of the 50 points. Now you consider in what way we were justified in selecting on the basis of 10 points. This has nothing to do with our capacity to select the remedy. According to my experience, about 75% of the homeo doctors are capable of correct selection. But before we make information available, drugs begin to come to our mind when we are talking to a patient. And if we have a weakness to select one of the drugs, instead of noting the drugs and waiting, we are apt to make mistakes. Welcome the drugs that come to your mind and note down on a piece of paper while talking to the patient. And after 5 or 10 minutes, another drug comes and knocks at our door. Note that drug also. Like that, that could be 3, 4, 5 or 6 or 7 drugs. For every drug to come and strike our mind, there is sufficient reason, logic and experience behind it. We are not wrong, but the pity is we are not totally correct. This is one aspect we have to consider. So, let us examine the bryonia patient once more. And he is more inclined to study his books in the room than to take part in social activities. That is his general disposition. Then have a third verification. And you have not much to do with the detail or the description of the headache or the fellow. If he begins to describe some detail about the headache, you can note down, but you have no business to give as much importance as you have given to the disposition of the patient. Because the patient may be wrong in his presentation, then the error is always there. Or sometimes the presentation may be accurate as his headache is concerned. But if he has the disposition of another drug, the mental structure of another drug, then our selection will be a failure. For example, a patient says that whenever I have headache, I feel it better by pressing it like this. Amelioration by pressure. It may be bryonia. May not be bryonia many times. Because the patient is more inclined to go out than to stay at home. Then there are two facts before you. The one a minor fact and the other a major fact. The one is the bryonia nature of his headache. The other is the mental setup of the fellow, the general disposition of the fellow. Even for 6 hours he cannot stay at home. And his wife understands him to be a very busy man always. Contraindicates bryonia. He feels that there is something very important to go out in the evening. Instead of going out when there is something important, the fellow begins to seek what is important for himself to go out, we should be able to feel the difference. What is it that we have to do in the town? For example, this evening I have to go to Brussels. A fellow feels like that. Ask him why. He says, I have some work. And then begins to think what work he has at Brussels. We can never cure him with bryonia. He belongs to the other group. We can call it tuberculinum group. I call it like that. Unless there is a move, the fellow cannot be happy. Even though if the fellow says that I feel very happy by pressing the head when there is headache and all that, either his report is a nonsense, or even though his report is accurate, it is a minor symptom, whereas this is a major symptom. The disposition of the patient is a major symptom, whereas the modality of the headache is a minor symptom, though it is a modality. As a point of experience, I want to present this fact before you. If you cannot make the fellow stop going to Brussels, and if you find the same type of experience with the fellow twice or thrice, you can write under his name like this: bryonia contraindicated. He never requires bryonia during his treatment at all, except in a very, very acute condition sometimes. Generally speaking, his syllabus never includes bryonia. I found this way of approach very useful, so that bryonia never misleads us for a second time when we are considering his case. So, for every case, if you have a record with you, not only the case history, but also the prescriptions in their chronological order, with date, and with our reason to prescribe for such and such a drug, then we will be able to locate the probable drugs for the fellow. The constitutional drug, the one drug which cures him, and the many drugs that are often required, and the few drugs that are required whenever he is having acute illness. And this forms his life syllabus. And when once you made a categorization of this syllabus during a period of about 1 year or 2 years of treatment, and keep it in your record, it becomes very easy for you to treat the fellow. And of course, when we begin to treat people on a long-range chronic basis in homeopathy, on scientific and orthodox lines, then the need for medicine becomes less and less, and the interval between sickness and sickness increases, and after a maximum period of 6 or 7 years of treatment, there comes a time when he requires medicine only for about twice or thrice or 4 times in the year, or sometimes he can manage without any medicine throughout the year at all. Whenever he requires medicine rarely, if you have this record with you, you have no business to make any error or mistake. You can eliminate the mistake of selecting out of the syllabus. This is one of my experiences. And keeping the record for a long time is very important. There is nothing wrong in keeping the records lifelong. And trying to understand a patient on this basis makes us also understand if we are treating the fellow on right lines or wrong lines. Because even after 1 or 2 or 3 years of treatment, if the fellow goes into an attack of sickness which was not with him previously, that means we are going on wrong line. That means we have administered a drug which is not included in his life syllabus. This is 80% possibility. Because as you make records and go on observing the records of patients, you will understand that every patient has a recurrence of a group of complaints and not others. Without having an understanding of the record, we may be inclined to believe that all people can get all types of diseases. It is never possible. If such a thing were to be possible, people would have died long ago. Nature is very, very benevolent, and even in sickness there is a process. Everyone gets only attacks according to his basic sickness and not otherwise. So, we can treat the fellow in right lines without committing mistakes about these matters. Then the patient reports that his headache started at about 9 p.m. Add one more point. Bryonia confirmed. Or 9 a.m. Bryonia confirmed. Because both the modalities are there under bryonia. It may be 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. But if the patient says it started at about 9 a.m. and gradually it increased, and again it began to decrease after some time, it's not bryonia. So, the course of action should be properly studied. And the fellow says, when you give time for him to narrate, he says, Doctor, somehow I am able to know that I am going to be sick. This is the case whenever I get sickness. It is typical bryonia indication. Ask him, how can he know? He says, I feel actually the sickness. I feel sick, that's all. Typical indication of bryonia. A few hours before or 1 day before or 2 days before, the fellow feels sick. Conversely, the fellow is active and working and very social in his behavior, smart, until, for example, 9:15 p.m. or 9 p.m. Suddenly, the fellow went to bed and he telephones that he could not get up. He was so weak and fatigued and tired. The friend cannot believe, because just 5 minutes ago I saw the fellow. He was very active and brilliant.
That's good.
He proposed